So starting off with side control, and what I'm going to be doing is getting into a series of offense eventually, which is along the lines of what I've called the smear campaign or lead blanket. Lead blanket, sort of the idea of the control and taking away space with minimal energy, and then being able to basically create your offense out of the position itself. And smear campaign is sort of like the next stage. And I've taught some of that before, released some instructionals previously, but smear campaign 2.0 is what I've taught before, plus some new additions. Honestly, when it comes to the most non-attribute based approach, easiest, requiring the least amount of athleticism way to get all the submissions that you've ever learned from cross sides from the time you first started as a white belt, I don't think there's anything better than what I'm going to show. But before we can get into that, first we need to really understand the fundamentals and the principles. And by fundamentals, as always, I don't refer to any particular set of, quote unquote, basic techniques. It's not about the techniques, it's about the core concepts for how to control somebody, take away their movement, keep them pinned, and then be able to, out of your positional dominance, create the submission. So position before submission. In this case, we start to develop the submissions within the position, but that all has to do with positional control. So we have, for a long time in SBG, my organization, we've had a apparatus for different positions, often referred to as Fundamental 5. So Fundamental 5 for side control is really what I want to revisit and get into, because if you have these 5 principles, in particular the first 3, can take you to a high level of mastery in terms of your ability to control somebody and then eventually get the submission. And again, this is principles that will transcend body type, personal preference, things like that. This is something everybody literally needs to be able to do in order and can do. So we'll get right into it. The first one is going to be physical connection. So we use the term, it's probably the most important principle in all of jiu-jitsu. I would say arguably even more important than leverage and things, even though leverage, posture, all that is going to be basically part and parcel of connection. But connection is really what makes the magic of jiu-jitsu work, and it separates high-level technique from high-level effortless and most effective technique, because you can be very high-level in terms of your effectiveness but still not have the maximum efficiency with your movement. You still may have to rely a little bit too much on athleticism, and that's never the goal. If you have to rely too much on athleticism, then there's going to be something lacking in technique that you'll have to make up for later when those physical attributes aren't there. Doesn't mean don't maintain your athleticism as you get older, things like that, but you should be relying more and more on supplemental training for that, not as much on your jiu-jitsu. Our goal is to make jiu-jitsu effortless. So from here, the first one in side control is connection, and so that is going to be a few components. Number one is the physical connection of your chest to your opponent's chest. If we're talking about traditional side control, cross sides here, where he is flat, he has what we call 4 on the floor here, both shoulders, both hips are pinned to the mat. I'm trying to keep him flat there, and I'm going to tee to his body. So what I'm going to be doing is aligning that Ironman beacon to Pete's Ironman beacon, okay? And that's going to stay there. So that is going to be the proper alignment. I'm not going to have my chest down here in his belly. There's certain times when there may be exceptions, but for right now, I'm not going to do that. Chest on his belly, his rib cage, floating up here. Okay, right now it's going to be maximum control, chest to chest. Okay. You'll notice that my alignment is cutting straight across. So there's times when I might be angled, but right now, for traditional purposes, I'm just going to have my chest right here aligned with his chest. I'm trying to occupy maximum surface area with my chest on his chest. And anytime I feel that I've come away from the alignment of those Ironman beacons, I'm just going to make sure that I readjust. Okay. So that's the connection part. And within that, there's also 4 arm positions, as you know if you've done jiu-jitsu for any amount of time. So I have both arms over like this, and unless I have isolated him in ways that we're going to be going into, what you need to know about this arm position is that in most cases, I'm either going to just be way better than my opponent, or I'm just in transition, basically maybe to shift to another arm position, and it'll be temporary. You don't really see much high level unless there's been a certain degree of isolation on another limb or something like that, where you're just going to be hanging out with both arms on the far side, because I open up this entire pocket of space here where I don't have total head control, I don't have total hip control. Okay? So this is one arm position. Second is both arms on the near side. Okay, so that was both arms on the far side. Second, both arms on the near side. So what you need to know about this one is that this can be very effective for cooking somebody with pressure. I do have his head zoned out. I do have his near side hip blocked out, so he can't pull guard. But the problem there is that although I can really take the wind out of him, I'm going to have to make a shift totally of my position to be able to really launch any offense. Both of my arms are somewhat tied up there. There's no immediate offense for me. So again, good for taking some energy away from your opponent, not so good for being able to control and then attack without a major shift. So the two classical primary arm positions that we see for good reason are the staggered arm positions. So one arm on the far side, one arm on the near side, like this. So far side over the head, near side blocking out the near side hip and thigh. Or this arm here, and anytime I'm over on this far side of his body, I want to be underneath that elbow so that he cannot easily get to an underhook, and blocking out his head. Okay, so these are the traditional ones. So those are the four arm positions. And that is all part and parcel of number one, which is maximum connection, and then within that you'll have those four arm positions taking away space. Number two is always simultaneous with connection to my opponent, and that is I have to be blocking out that near side hip all the time. And there's three ways for me to do that are going to vary based on which arm position I have. Okay? So I can do it, in this case, with my arms like this orientation. The only thing that's available right now to block out his hip is going to be my own knee. Okay? If I have the opposite staggered arm position, like this, it's going to be my arm blocking out his hip, and really what that means is his thigh. Okay? I'm not going to just be holding on to his hip here, because sometimes he can still get this knee inside my bicep, okay, like this. So what it really means is I'm going to try and keep him from being able to turn towards me and make that space, so constantly just blocking out down here on his thigh. The only other option I have is my own hip, which would be when I was shifting positions like this to sit out towards his head. And we'll be talking about what that means for connection, because obviously I've taken the Ironman beacons and separated them, so we'll be talking about where the connection shifts when I do this. But right now I can also keep him from being able to get his knee in by turning and blocking out that hip. And that is the maximum, or that is the main reason for here that I'd be doing that, because anytime that hip is not checked for even a moment on a good jiu-jitsu player, that knee is going to be coming in, connecting to his elbow, and he's going to be into an escape. If not in one full step, like getting his guard back, then he's almost going to be there. So anytime that I want to move one block, okay, away, I have to have something else there. So for instance, right now it's my knee. So before I would move my knee away, first I bring my arm over to check, and now I'd be able to move if I wanted to transition. So always your own knee, your arm, or your hip blocking out the near side hip. Okay? So connection, number one, and blocking out the near side hip, number two, always have to go together. Once we've done that, then we look to isolate the near side arm, or kill the near side arm. Okay? And what that means is Pete's always going to need to have some sort of frame in between me and him once he starts to really try and maintain any distance that he's able to create between me and him with his hips. Okay? So even if he has his arms like this or something like that in the beginning, at some point once he starts to escape his hips, he's going to need that frame, not to push me, of course, right, but to make sure that I can't take that space back. And what I want to do is be able to somehow isolate that arm by smashing it to the mat, getting my body up so that his arm is smashed between my body and his body, or even sometimes smashing it against his own body so he can't use it as that frame. And that's going to be number three. Now, I'll pause for just a moment to say you can get to a very high level of side control, maintenance, and attacks just with those first three, because those are really the keys. If you master those three, you'll have a lot of opportunity to dominate somebody and submit them. But then we start to look at, well, what else could he potentially have available if I'm really good at maintaining connection, blocking out the near hip so he can't pull guard, and isolating that near side arm. The only way he could really go at this point is away from me. And in that case, okay, let's say that Pete made a little space this way, and now he's going to start going away from me. That's where he could roll away, running man escapes, things like that. So in that case, what I need to do is control the far arm at the elbow, okay? So from here, this is quite simple. If it's this arm in this position, Pete starts to go away. Good, I control that elbow, keep going, hard, hard. Right, can't do it. If I had the other arm position, Pete starts to roll away, it would be this arm, okay? And it's basically making a, kind of like a doorstop there. And if you can control that elbow, you don't need to pick it all the way up, but that means that you can now control the one other place he could go if you dominated everything on the near side, is making sure he can't go that way in the far side. Obviously, if my chest has good connection to begin with, it's going to be hard for him to even bring his shoulder up, but there's always that moment where maybe he starts to get some space, and right before he's about to escape, I'm just always looking for whichever arm is most accessible to capture that arm at the elbow. Okay, so just above the elbow is best. Could I grab with my fingers in the gi or something? Of course, but that means at that point I become gi dependent and it won't translate to no gi. So that I would consider a save that is cloth dependent. Nothing I ever want to have become my habit. And that leaves us with number 5. So maximum connection, block out the near side hip, isolate or kill the near side arm, control the far arm at the elbow, and now that's all 4. Those are the critical ones. Now number 5 is really just within all that positional dominance is offense. And really offense comes down to just a few things when it's side control. That is, improve your position. So what would that mean? That would mean getting a knee ride or knee and belly, taking mount, possibly even transitioning into a back take, or it's going to mean submissions, okay? Just attacking with submissions, tapping your partner out. Once we have all these, then we have the context and the mastery for being able to go into everything else we're going to do in jiu-jitsu from this cross-sides position, including transitioning to north-south, to the other side, you name it.